show where we question everything. Today's topic is politics and powder keg in Serbia and Kosovo. Now, if you haven't known about it, I did make a video about the Kosovo-Serbian situation previously, and I talked about a little bit about the history. And the title was basically people going to war over number plates for vehicles. And basically it was the Kosovan authority that was trying to enforce that all Serbians must now relinquish their Serbian vehicle license plates, etc., and basically use the Kosovo version. Now, unfortunately, it sounds ridiculous, but it's actually a very serious environment or a problem. Serbia was originally part of Yugoslavia, and after the fall of the Soviet Union, Yugoslavia basically was divided up in many provinces, and all the smaller countries were basically peeled off, like Bosnia and Herzegovina, Slovakia, Montenegro, and etc. And even Kosovo, who was a province of Serbia, tried to do independence, but it wasn't that sort of clear-cut as one would imagine. History is a little bit more clouded if one really goes to the matter. But effectively, NATO decided there was terrorist actions by the Kosovans, Albanians in Kosovo. A lot of people were massacred and killed and so on. NATO blamed the Serbian authority, but it wasn't totally one-sided. Basically, there was a civil war call it an armed insurrection. And NATO decided to bomb Yugoslavia against NATO constitution and guidelines or rules. And they bombed Serbia for 72 days. And killed a lot of innocent people, destroyed a lot of civil infrastructure, and etc. And after that, they sent a peacekeeping force called KFOR to Kosovo in order to protect the peace. And then there was an agreement reached as part of the peace. And the let's call it like that. I don't know what the English name is. Authorities made an agreement where they were supposed to execute or implement a certain policies where the Serbians can have their own, the resident Serbian nationals who still remain in Kosovo, who were the minority in Kosovo, had at least protection and could establish their own municipalities and regional authorities, and thereby have some form of self-rule subject to the over umbrella of the rule of the central government. I hope I explained it correctly in English. In any case, in 2008, Kosovo unilaterally declared independence from Serbia, which is not recognized by the UN and by most of the people in the world, most of the countries in the world. But there are some European unions and America that does recognize the independence of Kosovo. So it's still a contentious issue. From a point of myself staying in South Africa, where we have a multiple cultural development country, it's difficult to really understand why ethnic people still cannot live together in harmony with their neighbors in the Balkans or in Europe, or in the eastern part of Europe. So it's difficult for me really to understand why neighbors still want to kill each other and drive and have conflict and stuff just because you have a different race or are of a different ethnicity. But those are the things, and those are what is happening. And I believe mostly that normal people would like to live back in harmony and don't want to really fight, and they want to prosper, do business, work, earn a living, have a family, get married, have a family, children, grandchildren, etc., etc. Usually these conflicts are driven by certain small section of the population that has some idealistic views, whether it's right wing or left wing, and they would try to convince and enforce their view on the rest of the population. In any case, that's more or less a background. Now, in recent months, it seems to me that Kosovan authorities in Pristina, they have a deliberate act, or they have a deliberate intention of chasing away the ethnic Serbian minority in Kosovo and make it a complete Albanian type of country. Why? I don't understand, but it seems to me that's an ideological belief. And something actually very familiar has come to light, especially looking at the recent events by, or not events by, admission by Angela Merkel that the Minsk agreements in Ukraine were never sincerely negotiated, and that the West never intended to honor or force Ukraine to allow the two Donbas republics to become more autonomy, to give them more autonomy and more self-rule, etc., etc., and that the purpose of the Minsk agreement was only there to buy Ukraine time in order to build up their military and thereby take back the Donbas by force. And now we hear the same type of talk going on in Kosovo. The Kosovo authorities in Pristina admittedly openly refused to implement the terms and conditions of the 1999 agreement, peace agreement, between the Kosovan authority and Serbia. They physically admitted, just like Poroshenko did it in Ukraine, and that like Zelensky is also doing now in Ukraine. And then the Serbians and the Russian representatives in Kosovo even stated that, and referring to Merkel's admission, that the West doesn't care about the Serbian minority. They don't care about enforcing that agreement that Pristina, authorities in Pristina have signed. And one has to ask yourself, and Serbia clearly sees that, just like we, independent here in South Africa, can see it. And the Russians are seeing it. And the other countries are also seeing it. And they start to realize that whatever agreement you do with the West doesn't mean anything. If it doesn't go their way, then the West will ignore it. One can clearly see again, according to the agreement, Serbia is allowed to send 1,000 troops or police into Serbia, into Kosovo, into those northern regions to protect and safeguard the Serbian population, and that is their right under this peace proposal, peace agreement. But the U.S. flatly denies that term and refused that Serbian police go in there. So does the authority in Pristina do, and so does the European Union do. But if they cannot deny Serbia that type of that clause in the agreement, but they insist on that it is being denied, then they are violating that agreement per se, because it doesn't fit their view. and then they violate any agreement, and then what's the point of any agreement? And unfortunately, if nobody wants to stick to a legal agreement between various countries, what remains then? Only violence and war. Because if you talk and talk and talk, we all know talk is important, but at the end of the day, if talk doesn't work, like it didn't work in Ukraine and Russia and NATO and so on, then the only option is military conflict, and that is why we have the special military operation in Ukraine, and that's why the Russians entered Ukraine, and that's why 4 oblasts are now part of Russia. And it was clear, if you really look at what happened is that because Pristina, the authority of Pristina, tried to enforce this number plate, vehicle plate type of unit, concept on the Serbian minority population, and they refused. They set up barricades and said no, they don't do it. It goes against their rights under the agreement. The municipality of these towns, let me just get the name, Mitrovica, Kosovska Mitrovica. In any case, that is one of the cities in the northern part of Kosovo, where the Serbians live. And then the municipality, who was elected by the population with a landslide victory, remember, these are not Albanians in those. They resigned out of protest. And what did the government do? The Albanian Kosovo, they filled them with their own people. And now the Serbians have no control over their own municipality regions. And they also sent in a huge amount of heavily armed military police, Albanian, Kosovonian police, which was started to manhandle and suppress the Serbian minorities. And they went as far as they raided a kindergarten school, and they also destroyed all the wine of a Serbian winery. For what reason, I don't know. And then one of the Serbians tried to protect him and attacked one of these policemen. He was locked up. And now the Serbians again say, this is not right. This is like authoritarian action, and it goes against the rules of the peace agreement. And so it's a deliberate act. But in the meantime, there are about 4,000 KFOR soldiers and police in Kosovo supposed to keep the peace, but they're not doing it. Just like you can get the equivalent during the war in the Donbass for the last 8 years. There were the OSCE forces that were supposed to monitor the violation of the Minsk peace treaty, where the heavy weapons were supposed to be withdrawn from the contact line and artillery fire was supposed to stop, and that never happened. And the Ukrainian forces consistently violated that agreement, and the OSCE was supposed to monitor that, and no, they never did it. And the OSCE was basically an institution set up by the West and the Russians in order to protect the peace. That was basically an international police force, if you want to call it like that. Not precisely, but that was more one of their functions. And to monitor it, and then send it back to the Western governments, and then report it, and then they could have acted in for the violations that the Ukrainian force did. But that was ignored. And then it later found out that some of these officers of OSCE were actually actively working for the Ukrainian forces and were determining the target coordinates, or the coordinates of certain targets in the Donbass region. So it's a scam. It's a pro-Western, corrupt type of organization. And it never fulfilled its proper function. It just protected the interests of the Western nations, of NATO. And so we have the same happening with the IEAE, IAEI, the International Atomic Energy Agency. Yeah, all right. They were supposed to come and inspect the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and they did. And they were told precisely who was the culprit that was bombing the nuclear plant. But no, they couldn't. It wasn't part of their mandate. They couldn't determine who was the guilty party, which is a bollocks. And they still got people there, and it's still being bombarded, but they still cannot determine who it was. So you can see again, it's a useless organization that only serves the interests of the Western world, Western nations, NATO. It doesn't serve the Russian side, whoever, serves a purpose. And the same you now have the K4. And they were, just remember, I remember some time ago, I don't know if it was true, but there were some revelations that the K4 were involved in Kosovo, actually involved in human trafficking, organ smuggling, and prostitution and drug smuggling and stuff like that. That's supposed to be the police that are supposed to protect the civilians, and then they take part of that. So what's happening? Well, this is gonna result into a war unless it is being resolved. You can look at the Prime Minister, Vučić, Vučić of Serbia. He's putting a lot of patience. He's showing a lot of patience and restraint in not escalating it. But nobody is listening. Nobody is resolving the problem. The Western nations are basically supporting the authorities in Kosovo, in Pristina, and they are not supporting trying to resolve this peace. They have a one-sided view and a one-sided mission, and that is to get Kosovo independent and recognized by Serbia. You can see it also by the EU's handling of the ascension of Serbia and Kosovo to the EU itself. How long it took to become observer status or in the EU. How Serbia is basically told directly that you cannot join the EU if you do not recognize Kosovo. So it's a carrot and a stick, and if you don't do it, then we're going to nail you and we're going to cut you off here and do this nasty thing to you and so on. So, and this time, in 1999, when NATO bombed Serbia, Russia was weak. They couldn't support Serbia. They couldn't stand up to NATO. But this time, they are strong enough. And they will support Serbia. So one has to be very careful. If you think you will not have a World War III start in Ukraine, and if these events go on in Kosovo, Serbia, then you will see World War III will start in that region. So everybody is treading lightly and trying to wangle and get their stuff going, but the Kosovo government has blatantly refused, just like the Ukrainians, the government, to recognize the minorities' rights and implement the agreements as it was agreed in the 1999 peace treaty. Just like the Ukrainians are not applying to the Minsk agreement. And therefore there will be conflict. Hopefully will not. Hopefully my predictions is wrong. But I just see escalation. That's all I see. And I see intentionally violations of agreements. Agreements that become null and void. It's like even, what did this woman say? Well, the Serbian Prime Minister Ana Brnabić asked if there is any resolution, agreements or principles that the West deems applicable, or are we just supposed to follow your horoscope in order to get your wishes? This is basically what she said to the US representative, Gabriel Escobar, who is stationed in Kosovo. Meaning, she blatantly called him out that what's the point of having agreements if you don't honor the agreements, if you don't execute the agreements are there to guide you in what you must do and must not do. And if you don't follow those agreements or those terms, then you are basically doing your own thing. And now the other party has to follow your horoscope in order to guess your wishes. Does it sound right? No, it doesn't sound right. But all parties are stubborn. And if you are stubborn like that, then that is unfortunately leading to escalation. So although I tried to, in my last video, tried to make it not a joke, it's never a joke. But the ridiculousness of fighting over certain principles, even ethnicity, I do not understand that. But then I am not one of those cultures, so I do not understand their culture per se, and I will admit it. But dying over things that my God is bigger than your God, and my wife is more beautiful than your wife, and my children are stronger than your children, and because I'm this nation and you are that ethnicity, what the hell? Who the hell cares? Most people really don't care. Any case, that's my story for today. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, tell your friends, spread the word. And until next time, cheers.